Tomorrow knows the price before you pay it. The Tomorrow Series, Episode 16. There's a small shop on the street whose name nobody remembers. The kind of street that exists in every city and no city at once. And on a certain evening, a young man walks in a hurry, the bell above the door announcing him before he has decided what he wants to buy. He has 3 minutes before he is supposed to be somewhere else. Somewhere his silence has already cost him something he does not yet understand. And so his eyes move quickly along the shelf until they land on a small wrapped box tied with ordinary string. It is cheap, it is convenient, it fits in his palm, the way an apology never quite fits in the mouth. He pays for it with coins he counts twice, and the cashier smiles, the practiced smile of someone who has sold 10 of thousands small things to 10,000 hurried people. And the young man smiles back, because in this moment, under this light, the transaction feels complete. He believes he has paid what he owes. He believes the box in his hand has settled the matter. But there is someone else in the room who is not smiling, someone who was never introduced, who stands neither behind the counter nor in front of it, who does not ring the register or counts the coins. Call this presence tomorrow. It is not God. It does not command the young man's steps, and it does not know, in the way only the Creator of all mornings knows, what will happen when the sun rises again. It is simply the part of time that has not yet arrived. Standing quietly at the edge of the room, the way evening light stands at the edge of a window before it decides to enter. And tomorrow has already begun to sense, the way a person senses a shadow before the object that casts it comes into view. That the real price of what happened between the young man and the person he is rushing toward was never going to be paid in coins. It was going to be paid in words, and words, unlike coins, are rarely counted twice before they are spent. This is how it often begins. This quiet mismatch between what we think we owe and what is actually being kept in the ledger. We imagine the cost of our choices arrives at the register, immediate and visible, and so we relax the moment the transaction closes. But some bills do not arrive at the counter. They arrive years later, folded quietly into a Tuesday morning, into the sound of rain against the window, into an empty chair at the table that used to seat one more person. Consider two boys who grew up on the same street, close enough that their mothers can call them both in for dinner from the same doorway. They built a small world together, out of nothing, a fence to climb, a dog to chase, a secret language made of whistles. Neither of them notices the years passing, because that is what years do when you are young. They pass without asking permission, without announcing themselves the way a stranger would. Then one ordinary afternoon, over something so small that neither of them will later be able to name it precisely, a sentence is said that should not have been said. Pride enters the room the way smoke enters the house, through a door left carelessly open, and neither boy reaches to close it. Tomorrow watches this happen, the way it watches everything, without interference, without judgment, only presence. The two boys grow into two men who nod at each other at gatherings and speak of the weather. Decades pass. One of them is not invited to the other's daughter's wedding, and he learns of it from a photograph shared by someone else. And he sits with that photograph in his hand, longer than the moment requires. Because he is doing the arithmetic now, the arithmetic he refuses to do on that ordinary afternoon when the door was left open. The price was never the argument, the price was the years, was after year after it. Spent and not speaking. A sentence, once spoken, does not always announce how long it intends to stay. A mother, exhausted past the edge of her patience, says something cruel to her child in the rushed heat of an ordinary evening, the kind of sentence that means nothing to her by morning, forgotten the way tired words are often forgotten by the mouth that released them. But the child keeps it. Children are careful keepers of the things adults discard 40 years later. That child, now with grey beginning at the temples, will hear an echo of that same sentence in an unrelated conversation and feel the old wound open as if no time had passed at all. The mother meant nothing lasting by it, but meaning has very little to do with what the sentence costs. Tomorrow does not measure intention, it only keeps what was said, the way a house keeps the sound of a door slammed. Decades ago, indifferent to whether the slammer remembers slamming it. Marriages carry this same quiet mathematics, though we rarely notice the ledger being written because we are so occupied with the noise of daily life. The dishes, the bills, the small logistics of two people trying to remain one household. A husband tells himself, most nights, that tomorrow he will be more present. Tomorrow he will put down the phone when his wife speaks. Tomorrow he will ask about her day and actually listen to the answer instead of composing his reply while she is still speaking. He is not a cruel man. He does not intend harm. He simply believes, the way most of us believe, that tomorrow is an infinite resource, a currency that never runs low. And so he spends today carelessly, certain there will be another today to make up for it. And for a long while, there is. This is the mercy hidden inside tomorrow's patience. It does not close the account after one missed evening, or 10, or 50. But mercy is not the same as blindness, and slowly, so slowly, that neither of them can point to the day it happened. His wife stops waiting for him to notice, not out of bitterness, out of exhaustion. She learns to carry her own days without expecting company inside them. And one evening, years later, he looks up from his phone and finds the room quieter than he remembers, and he cannot explain why. And the truth is that he is only now being asked to pay for 10,000 small evenings he thought were free. None of this happens because the world runs on some hidden law of its own, some silent machinery of consequence turning gears without a hand upon them. Every morning that arrives only because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to arrive, and every price paid and every mercy given is measured and permitted only by Him. Tomorrow does not decide anyone's fate, and it does not punish, it only waits. The way a curtain waits before it is drawn back, so that what was already true for the whole time, what was already true the whole time, might finally be seen in the light. This is the whole of its purpose in this story, not to cause, but to reveal. In its own quiet time, what today could never make us understand. There is a kindness too in this waiting, because the ledger does not only record what was broken, it records what was planted. An old man on one rainy night, puts his car to the shoulder of a highway to help a stranger change the tire, soaked through his coat, refusing the folded bills the stranger offers him afterward. And by the next morning he has generally forgotten the stranger's face, the way small kindnesses are often forgotten by the one who gives them, because giving asked nothing of his memory in return. But the stranger does not forget. Years later, that stranger is a father of himself, standing on the shoulder of a different road at 3 in the morning, helping someone he has never met, telling himself it is simply the right thing to do, not knowing that he is only completing a sentence that began in someone else's reign. Kindness, like harm, rarely settles its account on the same day it is offered. It waits for a future hand to receive what the past hand released. Not every story in this ledger is gentle. There's a young man who begins with something small, a pill borrowed to get through exams, a drink to soften the grief he has not learned to hold any other way. And he tells himself, as almost everyone does at the beginning, that he is only using it, not because being used by it, that tomorrow he can stop whenever he decides to. He is not lying to others, he is lying to the one person a lie always costs the most, himself. And here, tomorrow's silence is almost unbearable to imagine, because it has already begun to sense. The way one senses the second half of a sentence before it is finished. The shape of this same young man, 5 years ahead, standing outside his mother's door at 3 in the morning, his key no longer fitting a lock that was changed after the last time. His hands shaking not from cold, but even here, in the hardest of stories, the door is not sealed shut. There is a mercy, older than any addiction, a door called repentance that remains open as a long breath remains in the chest. And the same tomorrow that watched him fall is patient enough to watch him rise. If he chooses, one difficult morning, to turn back, nothing is owed to him for turning back, but nothing is refused him either. There is a father who works 2 jobs and says almost never that he is tired, who eats at last at the table and pretends he was not hungry, whose hands grow rougher and all the while his children's hands grow softer and longer, and he does not ask them to notice this trait, because a certain kind of sacrifice insists on his own invisibility. His son, grown now with children of his own, finds himself standing over a crib at 2 in the morning, exhausted in a way he did not know a body could be exhausted. And it is only here, in this unglamorous hour, that he finally understands the price his father paid without no once presenting the bill. Some debts are only recognized by those who inherit the same weight. This too is a part of what tomorrow reveals, not through prophecy, not through magic, but through the plain unfolding of a life lived long enough to stand somewhere someone else once stood. And there is a woman who keeps telling herself she will return to her prayers after this next difficulty passes, after this next season of grief settles, after tomorrow, always after tomorrow. And the door of her devotion remains half closed for longer than she meant it to. Nothing about the lake condemns her. The door does not lock itself against those who arrive late, but she begins to feel quietly the particular ache of postponement, the way a person feels the absence of a room they used to sit in, even while standing in a hallway of their own choosing. And there is another woman in a different house, in a different kind of hardship, who is given no answers for why her nights have gone so long, who does not receive an explanation for the illness in her husband, or the silence from her son, and who chooses, instead of demanding the reasons owed to her, to hold her hands open and her heart still, and to say, in the quiet way patience is usually said, that she trusts the one who decreed this night to also decree what follows it. Her sabr is not resignation. It is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of trust standing upright inside pain. And it is here more than anywhere else in this story that tomorrow's silence stops feeling like distance and starts feeling like companionship. Picture for a moment the places where all of these living lives quietly overlap without ever meeting. A long road at dusk, the kind that stretches toward the horizon, the color of a healing bruise, walked by the grown child who never got the apology, but by the husband who finally noticed the quiet, by the young man walking back toward a door he thought was sealed, a row of empty chairs at the table set for a gathering that used to be larger, a closed door that once meant nothing now means everything, standing between two people who could open it with a single phone call, and somehow never do. A desert horizon at the hour before sunrise, flat and honest, holding no memory of yesterday and no promise of tomorrow, only the plain fact of what is. Rain arriving against glass, exactly the way it always has, indifferent to whoever is standing on the other side of the window, remembering old photographs in drawers, waiting patiently to be found by hands that have grown old enough to finally understand what they show, trees that were planted by grandfathers who never sat in their shade, wind that carries the sound of a name spoken by someone who is no longer there to hear it answered. These are not separate images. They are the same evening light arriving in different rooms at different hours, for different people who share, without knowing. The same silent witness all of these lives, the two boys grown old and unspeaking. The child carrying a sentence for years, past his saying. The husband learning too, late, what his wife's silence cost. The stranger completing kindness he never asked to inherit. The young man walking back toward the door he thought was sealed. The father whose hands aged in secret. The woman waiting at the edge of her own prayers. The woman holding her open hands toward the night she did not choose. Are not separate rivers. They are eventually at the same sea, which is this, that almost nothing important is paid for on the day it is purchased. Some debts gather quietly for years before they are called in. Some blessings do the very same. And tomorrow, patient and unhurried, asks nothing of us except what we were always going to give it anyway. The version of ourselves that today's choices are still writing, one unremarkable hour at a time. Somewhere right now, there's a young man walking home with a small wrapped box in his hand, believing that the matter is closed, believing the smile at the counter meant the debt was paid in full. Perhaps it was, perhaps a box offered with a soft enough heart is sometimes enough, or perhaps he will learn the way most of us eventually learn, that the real price was a sentence he still has not said, and that tomorrow is not waiting to punish him for the delay, only waiting the way it always waits, for him to become someone capable of finally saying it. The road home is long tonight, longer than the walk requires, and the light along it is the soft gray of an evening deciding whether to become night. Somewhere behind the window, rain begins, and somewhere else a photograph sits in a drawer, waiting to be found by hands that have not yet grown old. Enough to understand it, footsteps continue down the long road unhurried to now, no longer racing towards the 3 minutes that started this evening, because some part of him has begun, without quite knowing why, to walk more slowly than before. This is how tomorrow moves through life, not as fate, not as judgment, but as the quiet certainty that whatever is true today will eventually be seen in the light we did not choose, the hour of, by the will of the one who owes every morning that has ever arrived. Perhaps tomorrow was never keeping score against you. Perhaps it was only holding your unfinished sentences in his open hand, waiting with more patience than you ever gave yourself, for the day you would finally be ready to finish them. If you like more of this, please subscribe.